We're going to talk about Samson today, and he's quite the character. One of the themes I've noticed, or I see throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I want you to think about this. How does God use flawed individuals to advance his purpose? So we have Samson, who's we're definitely going to see is definitely flawed. David was flawed. Moses, flawed. And all of these people he uses for good purpose, to advance his purpose and his kingdom. That was exactly what I was going to say. We are all flawed, and some people say, "Oh, I'm irredeemable, and I can't accomplish anything, and my sin is too great," or whatever it may be. God uses us where we're at always to advance his kingdom. Even though something bad happens or did happen or happens, we can still turn it to good for God. And he will make sure that happens if we listen and follow him. So this is going to be the story of how that worked with Samson. You have this beautiful printout. This is to take and kind of go home with. You're not going to use it so much today, but it kind of lays out the promised land, the period of Judges, when the kingdoms separate, as a visual reference, because we're going to skip about 12 Judges when we're going through here. So we're going to hit a couple of the big ones, then we're going to overlap when we go into Ruth and Samuel and everything else. So in your homework packet, I think it's on the second page, there's all the judges that we are going to skip over: Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and then we have Samson we're going to talk about today. Then there's Eli, and then we'll get into Samuel. So a lot of these guys we're going to skip over. We're going to hit the bigger story with Samuel. So last week Ian talked about this army of 30,000 that was whittled down. Why did God whittle that army from 30,000 to 300? Well, exactly. They didn't really need any of them, but if they would have went in there with 30,000, who would have taken credit for the victory? The soldiers. Israel would have said, "Oh, look how mighty we are." But they went up against all these people with 300 and decimated them. And back to our initial question, he used flawed people. He used, basically, I think Ian said they were clumsy idiots, who couldn't even drink from the water properly, to defeat this army. So he uses people that are challenged. And like Patsy said, I think we're all challenged. We're all sin and fall short of the glory of God. Okay, Samson was born to a barren woman and dedicated to God from the womb. There's a Nazirite vow described in Numbers 6, 1 through 21. I was going to read that, but I think I'm going to let you read that. It's in your homework packet. But it describes everything that's part of the Nazirite vow. It is Numbers 6, verses 2 through 8. And I'm going to gloss over it a little bit here. And it says, the Nazirite vow was typically done for a specified time, and Nazirite comes from a Hebrew term that indicates dedication by separation. So this Nazirite vow, which could be made by a man or a woman, included separation to the Lord, and they were to avoid grape products, hair cutting, and contact with dead bodies. In Judges 13, Manoah's wife followed this Nazirite restrictions while she was pregnant, And then God told her and her husband that Samson would be Nazarite to the day of his death. So the Nazarite vow started with her. She couldn't have any grapes. She couldn't have any wine. She couldn't have anything from a vine, so no raisins or anything like this. And that carried on to Samson for his life as well. It's important to note that Samson's long hair was not his source of strength. Everybody, the story goes that Samson's long hair was what gave him the strength. God was his strength. The long hair was just a symbol of outwardness, outward signal of it. But God was his strength. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of, here we go. The Philistines. And this kind of even is in play today. With the Philistines, with what's going on in Israel's conflict. The Philistines are first mentioned in the listing of nations that descended from Noah's son Ham back in Genesis. The Greek version of their name is where we get the name Palestine. Okay. It is believed that the Philistines migrated from the island of Crete and the Aegean region to the area of Canaan along the Mediterranean coast. They controlled land in Canaan as early as the time of Abraham and Isaac. That's Genesis 21. God later directed Moses and the Israelites around the land of the Philistines to avoid war. By the time of the conquest, the Philistines have moved inland and control 5 major cities. The first one they control is Gaza. Then there's Ashkelon, Ashdod, Gath, and Ekron. Each city is controlled by a lord or a king, and it was significant that the lords of the Philistines, likely the rulers of these cities, and they're going to come to Delilah, which we're going to read about Delilah here in a little bit with Samson. And each offered her a large sum of silver if she would discover the source of Samson's strength and tell them. Delilah appeared to care more for the material gain than for Samson. And then Samson cared more for Delilah than being obedient to God. May God strengthen us to avoid the desires of the flesh and the eyes of the pride of life. And that's in 1 John 2:16, which all end in destruction. So you can see that this battle that's waging today started back in, about 1,400 years into the creation of our earth. So it's been an ongoing battle, and it will continue to be an ongoing battle until Jesus returns. There's no way about that. All right, so we're going to jump into some reading here. I think, if I can find my note. Yes, we're going to go to Judges 13, 1 through 25. And this is the birth of Samson. The sons of Israel again did what was evil in the eyes of Yahweh, so that Yahweh gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah and the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had borne no children. The angel of Yahweh appeared to the woman and said to her, "Behold, now you are barren, and you have borne no children, but you shall be with child and give birth to a son. So now be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. For behold, you shall be with child and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. And he said to me, Behold, you shall be with child and give birth to a son. So now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, and you shall not eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death." Then Manoah entreated Yahweh and said, "O Lord, please let the man of God whom you have sent, come to us again, that he may instruct us what to do for the boy who is to be born. And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she was sitting in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, and she said to him, "Behold, the man who came the other day to me has appeared to me." Then Manoah arose and followed his wife, and when he came to the man, he said, "Are you the man who spoke to the woman?" And he said, "I am." So Manoah said, "Now your words will come to pass. What shall be the judgment governing the boy and his work?" So the angel of Yahweh said to Manoah, "Let the woman be careful in all that I said. She should not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. Let her keep all that I command." And then Manoah said to the angel of Yahweh, "Please let us delay you so that we may prepare you a young goat for you." And the angel of Yahweh said to Manoah, "Though you delay me, I will not eat your food, but if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to Yahweh." For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of Yahweh. Then Manoah said to the angel of Yahweh, "What is your name, so that your words come to pass, we may honor you?" But the angel of Yahweh said to him, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" So Manoah took the young goat and the grain offering and offered it on the rock to Yahweh, and he did a wondrous thing while Manoah and his wife looked on. Indeed, it happened when the flame went up from the altar towards heaven, the angel of Yahweh went up in the flame of the altar. And Manoah and his wife saw this, so they fell on their face to the ground. Now the angel of Yahweh did not appear to Manoah or his wife again. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of Yahweh. So Manoah said to his wife, "We will surely die, for we have seen God." But his wife said to him, "If Yahweh had desired to put us to death, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering from our hands, nor would he have shown us all these things, nor would he let us hear these things like this at this time." Then the woman gave birth to a son, and she called him Samson. And he grew up, and Yahweh blessed him. And the spirit of Yahweh began to stir in him in Manadan, between Zorah and Eshtal. So what did Israel do again? They continue with their whirlpool of sin. Right? They're like circling the drain. We're good, we're bad, we're good, we're bad, we're good, we're bad, we're just, it's a cycle, just keeps going and going. The Philistines were oppressing them. We already talked about that. So what do we know about Manoah's wife? And they never do mention her name. So she was barren, had no children. And the specific commands for her pregnancy, she was to drink no wine or strong drink or eating anything unclean while pregnant. And that's where we kind of jump over to number 6, and I'm just going to go through these. Being a Nazirite means being set apart or dedicated to God. And the child's vow is to last from birth until the day of his death. So let's look at Manoah real quick here. He was kind of testing the angel of the Lord, don't you think? You know, what's your name? Let me delay you. And he didn't give him his name. He said in verse 18, "Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?" So who has a different version? I'm reading out of the LSB. Who has a different version, like NIV? What do you have, Julie? Okay, so it's beyond understanding. It's wonderful. Kind of telling me that this is the Son of God. This is another appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament, a Christophany. And that's really important. And one of the things as I've been reading through the Bible this year is just noticing how many times Jesus appears before he's been born as the angel of the Lord, and it just amazes me totally. Okay, so Manoah honored God with the burnt sacrifice. So what was significant about, he offered the sacrifice, it was lit on fire, it went up in flame, and who else went up in the flame? The angel of the Lord went as well, and they never saw him again. So the promise is fulfilled. Samson is born to the couple, and after Samson's birth, the Spirit of the Lord moved within him and made him strong. So let's move on to Samson's strength. So we're going to be jumping over to Judges 14, verses 1 through 7. Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So he came back up and told his father and mother, I saw a woman in Timnah, one of the daughters of the Philistines. So now take her for me as a wife. But his father and his mother said to him, Is there no woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all the people that you go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, Take her for me, for she is right in my eyes. However, his father and mother did not know that it was of Yahweh, for he was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. Now at the time, the Philistines were ruling over Israel. Then Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother, and they came as far as the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came roaring toward them. And the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that he tore it as one tears a young goat. Though he had nothing in his hand, but he did not tell his father or mother what he had done. So he went down and spoke to the woman, and she was right in the eyes of Samson. So we see the first example of Samson's great strength. Samson wanted to marry a Philistine woman, and how did his parents respond? What did they think about this? Yeah, exactly. Can't you find somebody local? Are your own people not good enough for you? So Samson's motive, what was that? He wanted to marry this woman, and that had been placed in his heart by God. So this was part of God's plan, even though the parents didn't understand it. So now his mom and dad are mad at him, but he's following God. Okay, so God's got this plan for marriage, and what's he going to do with it? Does anybody have a guess? He's going to use this marriage, this union between Samson and the Philistine, to oppose the Philistines. And they were currently the people that were ruling over Israel. So he's going to use this for his good. Samson's strength, he demonstrated. He tore this lion apart with his bare hands. So was that because of his long hair? No. The power of God came upon him, empowering Samson. There was a little video that went with this, which really didn't say much. It just basically showed young lions running through the fields in Africa. Many of you may know that I have lots of cats at home. I cannot understand or see the strength of a single man tearing a lion apart. They are ginormous cats. And we watched that, what is that, the Secrets of the Zoo show. And these guys will have claws that are 1.5 inches or 2 inches long. So I can't even imagine just, being able to stop these, and it's beyond fathom. Okay, let's jump over to Judges 14, and we're going to start up in verse 18. Okay, so the men of the city, okay, that doesn't sound right. Okay. So the men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down. Oh, he's telling this riddle. It seems to have jumped here. He told a riddle to the Philistines for the wedding party, and the riddle was in verse 14. It says, "So he said to them at the wedding ceremony, out of this eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." And then the people at the wedding party could not figure this out. They couldn't figure out the riddle. So the men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, and this is after his Philistine bride weaseled the answer out of him, and she told them, "What is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." Then the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of them and took their spoil and gave the changes of clothes to those who told the riddle. And his anger burned, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion who had been his friend. I am supposed to read the whole chapter. Okay, so we will continue on here. Samson strikes down the Philistines. Now it happened that after a while, in the time of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a young goat and said, "I will go in to my wife in her room." But her father did not let him enter. And her father said, "I really thought that you hated her intensely, so I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please let her be yours instead." So Samson then said to them, "This time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm." So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned the foxes tail to tail and put one torch in the middle between two tails. Then he set fire to the torches and sent the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, so that he caused both the shocks and the standing grain, along with the vineyards and groves, to burn. Then the Philistines said, "Who did this?" And they said, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his companion." So the Philistines came up and burnt her and the father with fire. Then Samson said to them, "If you act like this, then I will surely take revenge on you. But after that I will cease." And he struck them ruthlessly with a great slaughter, and he went down and lived in the cleft of the rock of Etham. So Samson arranged this marriage and went to the wedding in the bride's city, and they have a 7-day feast. During this time, he presented a riddle to the men, and Samson gave in to the pressure of his bride, and she gave the answer to the men, and he got mad. So his father thought that he was so mad at her that he was never going to see her again, so he gave his bride to his brother. The father of the bride gave him to his brother. Some of these things that just go on are crazy. Samson goes off on these 30 Philistines in the Spirit of the Lord, and he takes over and just slaughters them, is what he said. So Samson's father-in-law gave Samson's wife to another man. I think I would have been a little upset. I don't know if I would have had the slaughter of 30 men on my mind, but how did the father-in-law try to appease Samson? Of course, by giving him her sister. So what did Samson do against the Philistines? How did he get revenge on the Philistines? Burned their fields. And I had never really paid attention to the fact that he tied the foxes with a torch on their tails and let them run through the fields. That is just, that would be, to me, that would be some kind of Hollywood sensationalism. But nope, that's in the Bible. So now the Philistines, they're mad. Their fields are burnt. They're out 30 foxes, and they go and burn the father and the daughter. It says in the text, it says, how did Samson respond? And it says he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow. And looking through the context, there's not a whole lot of details, but a blow to the hip and to the thigh was crippling to a soldier. So you take out their hip and you cripple their leg, and that's done. So it seems to be a metaphor of he did some severe damage to them. So we're going to go ahead and jump. I still have a lot of text to go through. So we're going to jump to 15, verses 14 through 16. Okay, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted as they met him, and the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him mightily, so that the ropes that were on his arms were as flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds dropped from his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, so he went, set forth his hand and took it, and struck down 1,000 men with it. This is another God filling him with power. So how did he break the ropes? Just snapped them like they were just little bitty strings. And what weapon did Samson use this time? Jawbone of a donkey. And how many did he kill with a jawbone from a donkey? 1,000. Okay. First ever boomerang. I never thought about it that way. I thought he just used it as a club. And I've never seen the jawbone of a donkey, so I don't I don't know how big it is. Okay, so now we're going to get to Delilah. And this is pretty much the bigger part of what we all know, the story of Samson and Delilah. So Judges 16, 1 through 3. Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went into her. And it was told to the Gazites, saying, Samson has come here. So they surrounded the place, and they lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept silent all night, saying, let us wait until the morning light, then we will kill him. But Samson lay until midnight, and at midnight he arose and seized the doors of the city gates and the 2 posts and pulled them up along with the bars. Then he put them on his shoulders and brought them up to the top of the mountain, which is opposite of Hebron. That's pretty strong. So what sin did Samson commit? He slept with a prostitute. And earlier, this is kind of similar to what he had done. He saw this prostitute, and as he had seen the Philistine woman, and he could not control his lust. He just had to go and be Samson. So he was able to escape Delilah by ripping up the gates of the city. But there is no mention of the Spirit empowering him to do so. No, Delilah was the harlot that he went in with, yes.
Really?
Yep.
Because it didn't say that in mine.
Oh, no. Let me make sure. No, it's not. It's just a harlot. You're right. Yeah. Yep, just a common harlot. Run of the mill. No, now in the next verse we meet Delilah. I'm sorry. Okay, the next passage, Judges 16, 4 through 6. Now it happened afterwards that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, and her name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, entice him and see where his great strength lies, that we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, then we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength is and how you may be bound to afflict you. So she's willing to sell out her love for Samson for basically 5,500 pieces of silver. Because each one of the kings of the cities that we mentioned earlier, Gaza and all of those, was going to give her 1,100 coins each to betray Samson. This woman's name, unlike the other two women, they did give it. So I'm glad you caught that, Kathy. His bride and the harlot were not named, but Delilah is. So the Philistines are still pursuing Samson. Delilah wants to know his strength. She's willing to get rid of him for money. We're going to jump now to Judges 16, verse 18. Okay, so Delilah saw that he had told her, so we've missed, I'm going to go backwards here. So they come and they find out that he snaps these strings and he lied to her. So he ends up lying to her 3 times about where his strength is found. Delilah saw that he had told her 15. Then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me with these 3 times, and you have told me where your great strength is. Now it happened when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. So she was pestering him. So he told her all that was in his heart and said to her, a razor has never come on my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak and be like every other man. And Delilah saw that he had told her all that was in his heart. So she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all that is in his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought up the silver in her hands. Then she made him sleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to afflict him, and his strength had left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that Yahweh had left him. Then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze chains, and he was a grinder in the prison. The grinder that they're talking about in the prison was a stone mill. So kind of like, did you ever see, that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? Where, Conan the Barbarian, where he was walking and he had these sticks that were in front of him, and he just pushed this around. He was grinding on this stone mill, is what he was doing. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it was shaved off. Now the lords of the Philistines assembled to offer great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and said to him, be glad. And they said, our God has given Samson our enemy into our hands. Then the people saw him and praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, whom has slain many of us. So it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, "Call for Samson that he may amuse us." So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them. And they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, "Let me feel the pillars of which this house is established, that I may lean against them." Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. About 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. Samson called to Yahweh and said, "O Lord Yahweh, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time, O God, that I may at once be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house was established and supported himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And he bent with his great strength, so that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he put to death by his death were more than those whom he put to death in his life. Then his brothers and all his brothers' household came down and carried him and brought him up, buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel for 20 years. Delilah's betrayal of Samson was very intimate. She wooed him to sleep. She had him lay on his lap, and took advantage of him that way. So what was Samson's plan when he heard that Delilah announced the danger for the 4th time? He says, "Well, I'm just going to go out and do what I did before." He says, "I'll just snap the strings and everything, and I'll just be done and gone and done with it." We know that didn't work. So why couldn't Samson defeat the Philistines? Yes, Yahweh had left him. And I think that he knew, once he realized that his hair was gone, he thought that was his strength. But then he came to the realization that Yahweh was his strength. And he was gone from him. So how did the Philistines humble him? I mean, they shaved his head, and he was bound. They gouged out his eyes and made him push a grinding wheel in prison. So I think Samson has been brought quite low from the all-powerful man that he thought he was before, and now he's sightless, tied to a wheel, being in grinding corn or wheat. So I think he's pretty much been set down. Again, his hair is the symbol of his strength, even in this passage, because it starts to grow back. The Philistines credited Dagon, their god, with the victory. So they got together, and 3,000 people. Samson topples the pillars and kills them. When you're reading your text sometimes, and it's here, it's Remember Me, and we talked about it, I'm not sure if it was my last lesson or the lesson before, with Achan, who had stolen the jewels when Israel went in. Samson says, "Remember me." And did a little bit of research on that, and when that term comes up, that's his statement of forgiveness. He's kind of telling Yahweh God, "This is what I've done. Remember me," and he's repenting. Is when you see that that phraseology in there. So the truth about this whole thing here now is, in spite of his failings, Samson was used by God to accomplish his plan to bring judgment on the Philistines. Back in chapter 14, we talked about Samson's parents thought nothing good would come of this first marriage, but the Lord was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. Even as Samson fraternized with the enemy, God was at work bringing his plans to judge the Philistines who were oppressing his people. So we have in your homework coming up this week, Scripture records Samson offers us little to imitate and much to turn away from. And so these are some Scripture passages about Samson's failings. Kind of go through them and see what we can, where we can better ourselves, and then all of the readings as well. This is what you were supposed to get for the timeline. But so do you have any questions about Samson that we could, or discussion points, anything you'd like to talk about with our guy?
I just wonder why these men in the Bible keep going around and just deciding they pick this woman. Why? Because they're pretty, they're beautiful, and they look. And she said he loves her, but she doesn't love him.
I think it points to his lust, and his heart was lusting, and he just didn't listen to anybody or anything. Yeah, exactly. And I see that a lot in the Old Testament, and it's a lesson for us. And I think there's a lot of stuff, we don't want to do that what Samson did, but there's things that we can realize about ourselves, that we are lovable, we are forgivable, and God will use us wherever we are at, as well as other people that we may know that have been in bad situations. God can still use us for good purposes. So if there's no other questions or anything, we will end there today. Thank you for being with me and us, and try to stay warm today.